this is going to be the other variant of the Eldritch Knight that I have already posted here on the channel. The thing is that that Eldritch Knight, it's an Eldritch Knight based on purely being a fighter. The reason for that being is that that guy has access to 10 attacks in the same turn. This guy is going to have something similar, but this guy is going to be a multi-class from a Warlock and an Eldritch Knight. And then again, it is going to be very similar, but the execution, it is going to be actually somewhat different. The thing is that it is not better one or the other. There are just options and choices that you have if you want to make them. Although what I do have to say is that this guy, this is going to have a little bit more versatility when it comes to range and also when it comes to socials, because this guy is going to have quite a lot of options to be able to use to persuade people and get people to thinking how you would want for them to think. So this is an excellent choice to make your face of your party. This guy could most certainly be that guy, and yes, it is going to be somewhat of a spell blade. Actually, this is a little bit better. I would say that this one is even better than the Sorkadin, and that is actually quite a lot to say. But let's just get into it. The first class that we are going to be choosing is going to be Fighter. The reason for that being is because we want the martial capabilities from a fighter ASAP. Also, the fighter is going to give us access to the heaviest armor possible, which is in our best interest. That is something that we actually do want to have. Now, for the fighting style, you can do some changes and tweaks around here and there. It is not going to be important. At the end of the day, if you want to go for great weapon fighting, that's something that you can do. Dueling, if you want to go for a sword and board, and two weapon fighting, if you want to go for a dual wield kind of builds. Then again, that is not going to be too different. At the end, it's up to your personal preference. Any of will work just perfectly fine. Now, the ability scores, that's actually going to be quite interesting. What we are going to be maxing out, and actually we're going to be dumping strengths. We'll get to that into a little bit later. The most important stats as we level up is going to be Constitution, and also it is going to be Charisma. Now, we're going to have 1 point left over. It cannot be helped. This guy has to be right here, so before you start shouting, you have an even number. That's only because that's the only point that we have left and we cannot allocate it in anywhere else. We are going to have the necessity to have an even number, and we are going to have the necessity to have an uneven number in Charisma ASAP. This is not a respec scenario. This is something that you are going to take as you start the game, because it's going to be something very necessary for the builds to work. And as a matter of fact, I'll guide you through as we level up, but you're going to be able to use this thing as soon as you start the game. Now, on the actual things that you're going to be proficient with, you're already going to have the Intimidation and Persuasion here. You're also going to have somewhat of proficiency with Athletics because of the fighter. But at the end of the day, the most important things that you are going to be leveling up, it's going to be the social ones, which are going to be the mainly focus for Charisma, meaning that you're going to have High Deception, Intimidation, Performance, and Persuasion. At level 2, you're immediately going to switch over to the Warlock, and the first few levels, the first level is the one that is going to be tricky, because you're going to have a little bit of low strength, and yes, that is going to cause you a hit on your saving, on your attack rolls as you level up, but it's not going to be too huge of a deal. You're not going to spend too much time on level 1, so you don't really have to worry about that. As soon as you get to level 2, you're going to have access to Eldritch Blast, and this is going to be your main means of damage until we have a little bit more of a established build. Also, I like to go with the Great Old One for a soft class for the Warlock, because this is going to frighten the enemies whenever you deal critical hits on the enemies, and it's going to have to make them go saving throws. We do have critical hits on demand thanks to the Tadpole. We're not going to be using the Killer Sweetheart on this build. We'll get to that later on this itemization section of the build. And the spells, they are going to highly be irrelevant, although like always, Armor of Agathis is always nice. I like to have Arms of Hadar, but then again, we're not going to be using our actions to cast spells that often. What we are going to be doing is that we're going to be focusing on melee and cantrips. At level 2, this is when we're going to get our Eldritch Invocations. This is where you're going to get your Agonizing Blast, which is going to add your Charisma modifier to your Eldritch Blast, and also Devil Sight for us to be able to see in darkness. This is going to be very powerful as soon as we get the combo for the Eldritch Knights. And then again, the spells, they are highly irrelevant. You can take whichever thing you would want to have in here. Now, on level 4, this is where we are going to have access to our Pact Boon, which is going to allow us to cast the Pact Blade to add the attack modifier to our weapon. So it doesn't really have to pass too much time before we can actually start using our melee weapon again. At this point, we are going to, again, pardon for the redundancy, have the cantrips, the Eldritch Blast as a main thing, and also we're going to have the pack weapon to add our attack and damage rolls to our weapons. Now the one thing that you're also going to get is going to be Darkness, and since we already have Devil Sight, this build gets very overpowered at level 4. We haven't even started the game and you already have so many, well, you already have so many tools to be exploring out there and just to be broken very, very, very early throughout the game. This is one of those builds that is going to allow you to stay powerful all throughout the entirety of your playthrough, so yes, it is a very, very versatile build. Even more so because at level 6, at level 5, you are also going to get your new feats. This is where we're going to get Actor, and that is why I was telling you, for you it was very important to have this thing. We're not going to, maybe, yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things like the mirror and anti-ethel and a whole bunch of different things. To keep this thing simple, I'm just going to have little this thing right here. We're going to get our proficiency bonus to deception and performance. Remember that those are commanded by charisma. They are skills that are going to benefit from your high charisma. So at this point, if you want to have people, if you want to convince people with either of them, intimidation, persuasion, performance, deception, any of the socials, you're going to have access to it, which actually makes everything so much good for this guy. And this is basically everything that we're going to take right here. Also, you can get Misty Step to move throughout the battlefield quite often. At level 6, this is where we're going to have our final level into Warlock, because this guy is going to give us the class feature for Deep Impact. This is going to give you an extra attack on your Deep Impact weapon, and this stacks with the extra attack that we are going to have with our fighter. A little bit more on that later on. The spells, again, highly relevant. We're not going to actually be using spells with this build. And in here, you can either take Beast Speech or Repelling Blast. Any of these guys that you have right here, it's actually going to be okay. Like always, I like to be able to speak with animals. I love animals, so it's just a feature that I just always like to have right here. But at the end of the day, you can choose whichever one you want to have right here. Now on the next level, we're going to have our next multi-class back into our fighter. This is where at this point we are going to get Action Search, which is actually quite amazing, but nothing that much more interesting is going to happen right there. This is where we're going to have our soft class available, and we're going to be taking the Eldritch Knight. We're going to be taking the Eldritch Knight mainly for one purpose. And you can either take Champion or Battle Master. That is going to be dependent onto you. But the thing is that the Eldritch Knight is going to have a synergy with our Warlock. Then again, the cantrips, you might as well take utility cantrips right here, because they are not going to be that important. We don't have high intelligence, and the Eldritch Knight actually does use intelligence as attack rolls, so we're not going to be taking any of those things. What it is going to break our character by just disgusting levels is going to be the shield, because if you pair the shield with the darkness, you're virtually unkillable at this point. You can also have the magic missile, which doesn't require attack rolls. It's always going to be a guaranteed free hit, and always just utility things right here is going to be amazing. Now, at level 4 from the fighter, we're going to have access to our new feats. This is where we are able to take our Great Weapon Master to increase our melee damage. Again, the spell is not going to be important, that is going to be irrelevant. Now, At level 5, this is very interesting because we're going to get our new class feature, which is going to be the extra attack, and a lot of people is going to be wondering, but that doesn't stack. And no, it doesn't. The extra attack for a level 5 on multi-class doesn't stack if you're multi-classing with a barbarian or a paladin, for example. That doesn't stack, but the extra attack that we have from our character right here is the extra attack of a deep impact weapon, so it's a different kind of extra attack, so that is going to stack, meaning that we have 3 attacks, 6 if you're hastened, and another 3 if you use your action surge, and 1 more if you use your great weapon master, and a little bit more if we are casting cantrips. We'll get to that a little bit later. Because at level 6 and level 11 we're going to get our new feats right here. We're going to be able to take our final ability improvement, which is going to be in Charisma. And once we have that thing at level 12, the final thing that we're going to have access to, this is going to be an endgame thing. The spells, like always, not important. What it is going to be important, interesting, is going to be War Magic. This is usually not that ideal. It's actually a kind of a niche thing, but I found a way to actually make it work in a fashion that is actually going to increase your potential DPS thanks to the itemization that we have, and that is what we're going to be discussing about next. Now, once you are on Act 3 of the game, you're going to be changing your stats, because you're not going to, as soon as you obtain the Amulet of Constitution, which we are going to have on the itemization, and there's always a link to it on the video description, we are going to dump this thing, and we're going to pump up Dexterity to have a little bit more of initiative. Like I said, it's not important to have initiative that much, because the enemy is never going to hit you because of the advantages, disadvantages, the mage shield, and all of the tools that you have at your disposal. So if you want to have a little bit more of saving throws on intelligence because of the illithids, and say that saving throw for strength, have something a little bit more balanced, you want to have a little bit less dexterity, to have a little bit more on your saving throws on constitution, that is always something that you can most certainly do. But I mean, just having a balanced character is always a nice idea. This is just purposes when you actually have reached the end game and you have the Amulet of Constitution and you can dump Constitution. Now, there's a lot of things right here that we are going to be able to change, and as a matter of fact, many of the things that we have right here, we are going to be switching them as we level up. I am going to provide you with everything that you need to know to level up. The main things, you can certainly do some tweaking around here, and but the main things, I'm going to give them to you right here. As for the weapon, the endgame weapon that we're going to have, it's going to be the Sword of Chaos, because this has a native necrotic damage right here. A lot of people might argue that it would be a better idea to go for the Baldurs Greatsword, but the Baldurs Greatsword benefits a little bit better, gets you a little bit more points when you have a high strength, regardless of your bound weapon. So might as well take the Sword of Chaos right here, because this is also going to be healing you on hit, and it kind of fits the playstyle. You know, as you level up, you're going to be able to use whichever weapon that you would like to use, but this is my weapon of choice for the endgame. And you might say, you have too little damage right there. Well, yeah, that is actually quite true, but that is only because we haven't used our bound packed weapon, and whenever we actually bind the weapon to our character, our Warlock, we change the modifier that we have for that weapon, and now the damage that we have with this weapon is going to be a little bit better. Let me see if I can find it right here, because I'm really dumb. And there we go. Now our main hand attack, when it's just pure melee damage, is going to be 22 to 40, which is not too bad. If you ask me, we're going to have 44 with our Strange Conduit Ring that we're going to be discussing a little bit later, but those are the weapons that we're going to be using. Now, this is the beautiful thing about it all. On our, well, we'll get to this in the gameplay section. This is the Ring of Arcane Synergy, which basically increase your damage that you deal, the melee damage that you deal whenever you use cantrips, meaning that every time that you're using your Eldritch Blast, you're also gaining melee damage, which is always amazing. So you basically start the combat with Eldritch Blast, and then you have the extra damage for your melee damage. Then we have the Strange Conduit Ring. We're always going to be concentrated in our darkness, that is going to yield you a native 1d4 psychic damage. the Helldusk gloves that are going to be giving you 1d6 fire damage, but this could most certainly be changed while you're leveling up. For the Dark Justiciar gauntlets, that is going to give you a 1d4 necrotic damage. As for the boots, we can be using the Helldusk boots, that's going to give you Hellcrawler. Amazing to move throughout the battlefield, and also you cannot be prone in here, meaning you cannot use your darkness, but as you level up you can use the boots of striding. Whenever you are concentrated on your darkness, you're always going to be able not to get prone. The cloak protection that I always like to use for the extra saving throws and the extra armor class. And then as for the helmet, you can have this thing right here, which is going to increase your charisma all the way to 22, which is always nice, mind you. But as you level up, you can change this thing right here to whichever thing you would want to have. Now, this is why I was telling you to multi-class, because as you level up, you could be using the Surgeon Subjugation Amulet or the Blood Mother's Revenge, whichever fits your playstyle a little bit more. But as you level up, you're going to need a little bit more constitution, so we're going to have the Amulet of Greater Health whenever the enemy thus manages by some miracle in heavens, which is not going to be possible. It's really kind of impossible for the enemy to deal damage to us. Well, we're going to sustain our concentration because we have so much constitution. And the gist of everything is that you basically have an unkillable warcaster, fighter, warlock that has access to a whole bunch of melee damage. And the way we accomplish that is that basically we start the combat by using our cantrip, which is going to be Eldritch Blast. The Eldritch Blast is going to give you synergy for the 2 next attacks that you are going to have, which is going to yield you more melee damage. And then whenever there are enemies outside of the darkness, they are never going to want to go inside because of the disadvantages that they are going to suffer. You can use your Eldritch Blast that is more potent because of your charisma modifier to deal damage to the enemies that are outside of the darkness. Whenever you are outside of the darkness, or whenever there's enemies with devil sights, which there are a couple of enemies that have devil sight, it doesn't really matter because you also have the armor, the mage shield from the Eldritch Knights, so your armor class is always going to be high. If you have a hasted character from your mage, that is going to be a +2 to armor class. If you give shield protection from your cleric, that is going to be +2 to armor class. But if you do not want to be carrying anyone around, it's just going to be more than enough armor class, the one that you are going to have, because of the mage shield and disadvantages that the enemy has on top of you. And you also have quite a lot of attacks. Like I said, you have action surge, you have like 2 extra attacks, so you can potentially be dealing 10 attacks in one single turn, and also you have access to Eldritch Blast that is going to allow you to remain in the darkness, do not get outside from there, and still be blasting the enemies that are outside of the darkness, that they do not want to get inside of the darkness because they are too afraid to face you. So overall, it's just an amazing character. It's so versatile, it has everything, it's a monster, it's virtually unkillable. We don't have the Helldusk's helmet right here. If you want to sacrifice a little bit of charisma to have a helmet that is going to save you from critical hits, that is always advisable, because if you have a helmet that it prevents from the enemy to have critical hits onto you, that virtually makes you invulnerable. As of right now, the enemy can deal critical hits to you, but it's never going to be that much of damage because you have plated armor, which diminishes the damage that you receive. So there's always that concessions, things that you would want to be making, things that you would not want to be making. But it's a very powerful character, and I love it. I just love it. You can give this character to Will, and it's also going to be role-playing friendly because you are the Blade of the Realms, and he seems to be some kind of a fighter that is also a warlock, so it's just the perfect pick for Will. So yeah, if you like the content, like always, a like on the video is super appreciated. No one's told you today that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person. You are indeed a gorgeous and beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel before you close the door. Now I'll be seeing you go then, gorgeous and beautiful people, next one. Have a beautiful day, and goodbye.